I'm Lester, 32 years old, and for decades I tried to earn my parents' approval, despite being the invisible child in our family. No matter what I achieved, my younger sister Jessica always received the spotlight and endless praise. But when my parents forgot my birthday entirely, then bought her a house, that same week, something inside me finally broke. I decided I'd had enough of being forgotten. Before I tell you how I vanished from my family's radar, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible to the people who should care the most. Growing up in suburban Boston, our family appeared picture perfect from the outside. My father, William, built a successful career as an accountant at a prestigious firm downtown, while my mother, Martha, excelled in real estate, becoming one of the top-selling agents in our county. We lived in a comfortable 4-bedroom colonial on a tree-lined street with manicured lawns and friendly neighbors. On paper, we had everything a family could want. But beneath that polished exterior ran a current of favoritism so blatant that even family friends would occasionally comment on it, though always in hushed tones when they thought I couldn't hear. My sister Jessica, 5 years my junior, captured my parents' hearts and attention from the moment she arrived. She was their miracle baby born after my mother experienced 2 miscarriages following my birth. Perhaps that's where it began, this subtle positioning of Jessica as precious and me as merely adequate. Throughout elementary school, I excelled academically. My teachers consistently praised my aptitude for mathematics and science, suggesting advanced programs and enrichment activities. When I brought home perfect report cards, my father would glance at them briefly and say, "Good job, son," before returning to whatever task occupied him. My mother might place it on the refrigerator for a few days before it disappeared into a drawer rarely mentioned again. When Jessica brought home B's and C's, however, the celebration was effusive. "Look how hard she's trying," my mother would exclaim. My father would take the family out to dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant, Salvatore's, where Jessica could order whatever she wanted as a reward for her improvement. I would sit quietly fork, pushing pasta around my plate, wondering why my consistent, as warranted, no similar acknowledgement. High school amplified these differences. I joined the debate team math club and ran cross-country. I stayed up late studying, determined to be valedictorian. When I achieved that goal standing at the podium addressing my graduating class, I spotted my father checking his watch repeatedly. My mother spent most of the ceremony taking photos of Jessica, who was busy texting friends rather than listening to my speech. At the small celebration afterward, at our house, conversation quickly turned to Jessica's upcoming junior year and her possibilities for college, though her grades remained firmly average. The college years brought the starkest contrast. I received a full academic scholarship to Massachusetts Institute of Technology, one of the most competitive universities in the country. The day my acceptance letter arrived, I rushed home bursting with excitement. My parents were in the kitchen helping Jessica with a poster for her sophomore homecoming dance. "Mom, Dad, I got into MIT. Full scholarship," I announced, holding up the letter. My father nodded. "That's great, son. Smart financial move. Jessica, I think the glitter looks better on the blue part." My mother's response was similarly deflating. "We'll have to get you some new clothes before you go. Jessica, honey, should we add some ribbons around the border?" That night I lay awake, wondering if I had somehow failed them by succeeding on my own. Perhaps they would have been prouder had I needed their financial support. It was the first time I considered that my self-sufficiency might actually be working against me. 2 years later, Jessica got accepted to Boston University with her 3.2 GPA. My parents threw a massive party, invited the extended family, and presented her with a brand new Toyota Camry with a red bow on top. "You'll need reliable transportation," my father said, beaming with pride. I had commuted to MIT on the T, our public transportation system, for 2 years before saving enough from my part-time job to buy a 10-year-old Honda with 150,000 miles on it. After college, I secured a position at a leading technology company developing software solutions for healthcare systems. My starting salary exceeded what many of my peers were making, and I quickly advanced through the ranks based on my work ethic and innovative approaches. Each promotion or bonus came with a brief phone call to my parents, who would invariably say they were proud before changing the subject to Jessica's latest adventure. And adventures she had. Jessica bounced from job to job after college, never staying anywhere longer than 8 months. She tried marketing, then event planning, then teaching, then real estate like our mother. Nothing seemed to stick, but my parents rationalized each departure as Jessica finding herself or being too creative for corporate structure. They subsidized her apartment in one of Boston's trendiest neighborhoods and frequently covered her bills when she came up short. Meanwhile, I purchased my own condo in Cambridge, invested wisely, and built a comfortable life through careful planning and hard work. When I invited my parents over for the housewarming, my mother spent most of the evening suggesting different furniture arrangements and curtain styles, as if my selections were temporary placeholders. My father asked if the mortgage was manageable on my salary, despite knowing what I earned and having access to my excellent credit score through his accounting connections. I dated occasionally, though. Relationships often faltered when partners noticed my family dynamic. "They don't seem to know you at all," one girlfriend remarked after a particularly painful Thanksgiving, where my parents spent 3 hours discussing Jessica's latest boyfriend, while barely acknowledging my recent patent application. She was right, of course. They didn't know me, hadn't attempted to know me for years. Still, I rationalized their behavior. Perhaps they simply worried about Jessica more because she seemed less stable. Maybe they assumed I was fine because I rarely complained or asked for help. I told myself that emotional support wasn't something I needed from them anymore, that I had outgrown such requirements. I focused on building friendships and professional connections that valued my contributions and reciprocated my efforts. But deep down, the hurt calcified into a protective shell. I shared less and less about my life during our monthly dinners. I smiled and nodded as Jessica dominated conversations with dramatic stories about workplace conflicts or romantic tribulations. I asked polite questions about my parents' lives and listened attentively to their responses. I became the perfect audience member in the ongoing show where Jessica remained the star and my parents the adoring directors. I was simply part of the scenery necessary for composition, but not worthy of focus. By my 30th birthday, I had stopped expecting acknowledgement. When my parents called 2 days late with a hurried happy birthday before launching into news about Jessica's promotion at her latest job, I felt nothing. The numbness was almost comforting, a sign that I had successfully detached from the hope of their genuine interest. Or so I thought, until 2 years later, when their complete disregard coincided with their most extravagant gift to Jessica yet. My 32nd birthday began like any ordinary Tuesday. I woke up at 6, went for my usual 5-mile run along the Charles River, and returned home to shower and prepare for work. Though I had long stopped expecting much from my family on my birthday, some small, stubborn part of me still hoped for at least a text message acknowledgement. I checked my phone before heading out the door. Nothing from my parents or Jessica. At work, several colleagues stopped by my desk with birthday wishes. My team had organized a small celebration with cupcakes from my favorite bakery near the office. My boss mentioned the excellent progress on our latest project and hinted at possibilities for advancement in the coming year. These gestures from people who had known me for far less time than my family warmed me, yet simultaneously highlighted the absence of any communication from those who had known me my entire life. By lunchtime, my phone had accumulated birthday messages from college friends, former colleagues, and even my dentist's automated system. The contrast between these thoughtful remembrances and my family's silence grew more pronounced with each notification. Still, I reasoned perhaps they were planning to call in the evening. Perhaps for once, they had something special planned. Throughout the afternoon, I found myself checking my phone more frequently than usual. Each time I saw the screen empty of any message from my parents or Jessica, a small weight added itself to the growing pile of disappointment I carried. By 5 o'clock, that weight had become so familiar, I almost stopped noticing it. After work, I treated myself to dinner at Galleria Umberto, a small Italian restaurant I'd discovered shortly after moving to Cambridge. The owner, Antonio, recognized me and offered a complimentary glass of wine with my meal. "For your birthday," he said with a genuine smile, though I'd mentioned it only once in passing months earlier. As I savored the excellent pasta primavera, I continued the increasingly pathetic ritual of checking my phone every few minutes. Nothing. Back at my condo that evening, I poured myself a modest glass of scotch and settled onto my balcony, overlooking the twinkling lights of the city. The early October air carried a slight chill harbinger of the coming New England winter. I wrapped myself in a light blanket and tried to focus on gratitude for the good things in my life: financial stability, professional success, a comfortable home, loyal friends. Yet the silence from my family echoed louder than any of these blessings. At 9:45, my phone finally rang. Jessica's face appeared on the screen, and despite everything, my heart lifted slightly. She had remembered after all. "Hello," I answered, unable to keep a slight note of anticipation from my voice. "Lester. Oh my God, you will not believe what just happened." Jessica's voice bubbled with excitement. No hint of birthday wishes forthcoming. "What's up?" I asked, the familiar disappointment settling back into place. "Mom and Dad just bought me a house. Can you believe it? A whole house. I'm literally standing in it right now." The words hit me like individual blows. Mom and Dad bought a house for Jessica. A house. I managed to keep my voice level. "Yes. It's in Brookline, that neighborhood I've always loved. It's gorgeous, Lester. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a backyard with this amazing maple tree hardwood floors throughout. The previous owners just renovated the kitchen last year, so it has all new appliances and this incredible marble island. I'm totally in shock." As Jessica continued describing the house in rapturous detail, my mind calculated the approximate value. Brookline was one of the most expensive suburbs of Boston, with average home prices well above $750,000. The features she described pushed it likely closer to the $1 million mark. "That's quite a gift," I said, when she paused for breath. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion. That's what makes it so amazing. They just called me last week, saying they'd been looking at investment properties and found this place. They thought it would be perfect for me. Dad handled the down payment, and they're covering the mortgage until I find a more stable job situation. Isn't that incredible? No occasion, no special reason. Just an ordinary week in October when they decided to purchase a house for their daughter while not even texting their son on his birthday." "So when did you move in?" I asked, desperate to end the conversation before my composure cracked. "That's the thing. I just got the keys today. The closing was this morning. Mom and Dad took me out to celebrate afterward, and now I'm just walking through rooms pinching myself. You have to come see it this weekend." Today. They had been at a closing for Jessica's house on my birthday. The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. They hadn't forgotten my birthday. They had prioritized Jessica's house, closing over it, not even bothering to send a text between signing papers. "Sounds great," I said, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. "Listen, I'm in the middle of something, so I should probably go." "Oh, sure. I just had to tell someone right away. I still can't believe it's mine. Talk soon." She hung up, without ever realizing or mentioning what day it was. I sat motionless on my balcony for nearly an hour after that call ended. The scotch in my glass remained untouched as I processed what had just happened. This wasn't simply forgetting my birthday. This was active dismissal of my existence, while simultaneously bestowing an extravagant gift upon my sister. For years, I had made excuses for their behavior. They're busy. They assume I'm fine on my own. They worry more about Jessica because she struggles more. But in that moment on my dark balcony overlooking a city that suddenly felt vast and empty, I confronted the truth I had been avoiding for decades. They didn't love me the same way they loved her. Perhaps they didn't love me at all. The realization should have devastated me. Instead, it clarified everything with a strange, cold precision. Years of confusion and hurt crystallized into a single, undeniable fact. I had spent my life trying to earn the affection of people incapable of giving it to me. Every achievement, every milestone, every attempt to be the perfect son had been an exercise in futility. I finally picked up my glass and drained it in one swallow. The scotch burned down my throat, but I barely noticed. A plan was already forming in my mind, a decision so clear and necessary, I wondered why I hadn't made it years ago. If I didn't exist to them, then perhaps I should make that perception a reality. That night, I slept more soundly than I had in years, the certainty of my decision providing a strange comfort. When I woke the next morning, my resolve had only strengthened. I would disappear from their lives as completely as they had emotionally disappeared from mine. No dramatic confrontation, No tearful accusations, just a clean surgical removal of myself from their world. The Lester, who had desperately sought their approval for 32 years, died on that birthday night. In his place emerged someone new, someone unwilling to accept scraps of attention from the table of family connection. Someone ready to discover what life might feel like without the constant ache of parental indifference. The morning after my birthday revelation, I approached my disappearance with the same methodical attention to detail that had served me well in my professional life. This wouldn't be an impulsive vanishing act, but a carefully orchestrated extraction from a situation that had caused me pain for too long. My first step involved work. Our company had recently expanded operations to Seattle, opening a new office focused on developing telehealth solutions. Several colleagues had already transferred, and management had been encouraging others with my level of expertise to consider the move. I had previously declined, primarily due to family ties in Boston. The irony of that reason now struck me as I composed an email to my director requesting consideration for transfer. "I've been reassessing my career trajectory," I wrote, "and believe the Seattle office would provide valuable growth opportunities." I outlined specific projects where my skills would add value and expressed willingness to relocate as soon as possible. The response came within hours, enthusiastic and supportive. A virtual meeting was scheduled for the following day to discuss details. That evening, I researched apartments in Seattle, focusing on neighborhoods that offered convenient access to the new office, while providing the urban lifestyle I'd grown accustomed to in Cambridge. I narrowed my options to 3 buildings in the Capitol Hill area and scheduled virtual tours for the weekend. Next came the practical logistics of disappearing. I created a comprehensive checklist: redirect mail transfer, banking relationships, schedule movers, notify my landlord, update contact information with essential services. Each item I ticked off provided a small sense of satisfaction, concrete steps toward freedom from decades of emotional neglect. The most challenging aspect would be handling my departure without raising immediate alarms. I didn't want a dramatic scene or tearful confrontations that might weaken my resolve. Instead, I decided on a strategy of gradual information restriction. I would attend one final family dinner, observe their behavior with new clarity, and then simply fade away without announcement. That Sunday dinner arrived with painful predictability. I drove to my parents' house in Wellesley, the affluent suburb where they had moved after Jessica left for college. The modest home of my childhood had been replaced by this 5-bedroom colonial with professional landscaping and a 3-car garage housing my father's prized Audi and my mother's Mercedes SUV. Jessica arrived shortly after me, bubbling with excitement about her new house. She barely greeted me before launching into detailed descriptions of her decorating plans. My parents listened with rapt attention, offering suggestions and promises to help with various aspects of the move. "Dad already connected me with his contractor for some minor renovations," Jessica explained between bites of my mother's pot roast. "And Mom's going to help me pick out furniture next weekend." "That's wonderful, honey," my mother beamed. "I was thinking Restoration Hardware would have perfect pieces for the living room." "And I've set up an account for household expenses," my father added. "Just use the credit card I gave you for anything you need to get settled." I sat quietly observing this exchange with the detached interest of an anthropologist studying an unfamiliar culture. Not once during the meal did anyone ask about my life, my work, or my recent birthday. It was as if I existed merely as an audience for Jessica's good fortune. When dessert arrived, I made one final test. "I've been considering some changes," I mentioned casually during a rare lull in conversation. "That's nice, dear," my mother responded, without looking up from serving apple pie. "Jessica, do you want whipped cream on yours?" No follow-up question, no interest in what changes I might be contemplating. Just immediate redirection to Jessica. My father briefly glanced my way. "Everything okay with the condo?" "Fine," I replied, recognizing his concern was limited to financial matters. "Just thinking about some new opportunities." He nodded clearly, relieved that no monetary support would be required, then turned to Jessica. "Have you thought about what color you want to paint the guest bedroom?" And there it was, the final confirmation that my presence or absence made little difference in their lives. As I drove home that night, a strange calm settled over me. The decision was made justified, by every interaction of that evening. Over the next 2 weeks, I methodically executed my plan. The Seattle apartment was secured a modern one-bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. My company arranged for relocation assistance, covering moving expenses and offering a generous stipend for setting up my new home. I signed a month-to-month lease with my current landlord, who agreed to maintain discretion about my departure. I carefully sorted through my possessions, donating items I no longer needed, and packing the rest for the cross-country move. Each box sealed represented another step toward my new life. I updated my address with banks, subscription services, and professional organizations, ensuring nothing would be forwarded to my parents' home or reveal my new location. Social media required particular attention. Rather than deleting accounts which might trigger immediate concern, I adjusted privacy settings and gradually reduced activity. I wanted to become a digital ghost present, but inaccessible. The night before my departure, I drove through Boston one last time. I passed my elementary school where teachers had praised achievements my parents barely acknowledged. I circled by the high school track where I had run countless miles, my parents rarely in the stands for meets. I drove past MIT's impressive campus where I had thrived despite their indifference. Finally, I parked outside my childhood home, now occupied by a young family. Through the windows, I could see children playing in what had once been our living room. A father sat on the floor with them, fully engaged in their game. The sight simultaneously ached and reassured, reminding me that different family dynamics existed, that what I had experienced wasn't the inevitable nature of parent-child relationships. The movers arrived early the next morning, efficiently loading my carefully labeled boxes into their truck. My essential items had already been shipped ahead to arrive at my new apartment before me. I had booked a one-way flight departing that afternoon, allowing enough time to complete final errands before leaving. As I handed my keys to the landlord and climbed into the waiting Uber, I felt a momentary surge of doubt. Was I overreacting? Should I at least leave a note explaining my departure? The thought evaporated as I recalled Jessica's call on my birthday, my parents at the closing for her house, instead of acknowledging my existence. No, this clean break was necessary. I had spent 32 years trying to be noticed. Now I would see how long it took them to realize I was gone. The flight to Seattle offered 6 hours of liminal space, suspended between my old life and whatever waited ahead. I declined the offered beverage service and instead closed my eyes, imagining myself shedding layers of expectation and disappointment with each mile westward. By the time the plane touched down at SeaTac Airport, Leicester, the forgotten sun had been packed away, leaving room for whoever I might become in this new city, 3,000 miles from the family that never truly saw me. Seattle greeted me with uncharacteristic sunshine, as if welcoming me to my fresh start. My new apartment in Capitol Hill exceeded expectations with modern furnishings, an open floor plan, and windows that showcased a spectacular view of the downtown skyline, and on clear days, Mount Rainier looming majestically in the blank distance. The first week passed in a blur of unpacking, organizing, and orienting myself to the neighborhood. I discovered a coffee shop 2 blocks away that served the best Americano I'd ever tasted at a bookstore, with comfortable reading nooks and an excellent technology section and a small park perfect for morning runs. These places quickly became anchors in my new routine, familiar touchpoints in an otherwise unfamiliar city. Work provided structure and purpose. The Seattle office operated with a different energy than Boston, more collaborative and less hierarchical. My new team welcomed my expertise, and I found myself engaged in challenging projects that stretched my abilities. For the first time in years, I felt fully present in my professional life, unburdened by the background hum of family disappointment. During those initial weeks, I checked my phone, occasionally curious if my absence had registered yet. Nothing from my parents. Their silence, once painful, now confirmed the wisdom of my decision. If they couldn't notice my presence, perhaps they wouldn't notice my absence either. 13 days after my arrival in Seattle, the first text from Jessica appeared. "Hey, tried calling your landline, but it says disconnected. Did you change your number?" I stared at the message for several minutes, considering my response. This was the moment of commitment. Responding would undermine everything I had set in motion. Not responding would make my disappearance real. I placed the phone screen down on my coffee table and walked to the window. Seattle spread before me, a city of possibilities where no one had preconceived notions about who I was or what place I should occupy. I was writing my own story here, no longer a secondary character in the Jessica show. The phone remained unanswered. 3 days later, Jessica texted again. "Seriously, what's going on? Mom tried calling you about Sunday dinner." Again. I did not respond. A week later, the first call from my mother appeared. I let it go to voicemail. "Lester, honey, we haven't heard from you in a while. Give me a call back when you get this. We're having pot roast on Sunday if you want to come over." The casual tone struck me as surreal. Nearly a month of complete silence from me. And she spoke as if I had simply missed a call or two. No urgency, no concern. Just the assumption that I would naturally respond and resume my role as the polite, overlooked son. Another week passed. My life in Seattle expanded. I joined a hiking group and spent a Saturday exploring trails in the nearby Cascade Mountains. The physical exertion and natural beauty provided a kind of therapy I hadn't known I needed. That evening, over beers, with 2 members of the group, I shared stories about my work and interests, carefully avoiding mentions of family. These new acquaintances asked questions, showed genuine interest in my responses, and shared their own experiences in return. The contrast to family dinners dominated by Jessica was stark and refreshing. 6 weeks after my departure, the tone of messages began to shift. My father left a voicemail that actually contained a note of confusion. "Lester, your mother and I are wondering why we haven't heard from you. Your condo building said you moved out. Call us, son." Jessica's texts grew increasingly annoyed. "What the hell, Lester, Mom and Dad are worried. At least let someone know you're okay." I maintained my silence, though each message tugged slightly at my resolve. Not out of guilt, but out of conditioning. For years, I had been trained to respond to their needs, to be available when it suited them, to fulfill my supporting role in the family dynamic. Breaking that pattern required constant recommitment to my decision. As Thanksgiving approached, the messages increased in frequency and urgency. My mother called daily, leaving increasingly worried voicemails. My father, typically reserved, began calling as well. "Lester, this isn't like you. We're concerned. Please call as soon as you get this." For the first time, I heard genuine worry in his voice. A part of me wondered how long it had taken them to realize something was truly wrong, rather than assuming I was simply busy or temporarily unavailable. Had they checked my condo before November? Had they noticed my social media silence? Or had they only become concerned when holiday plans required my presence? The week of Thanksgiving brought the first voicemail that actually moved me. My father's voice, typically controlled and businesslike, cracked slightly as he spoke. "Son, I don't know what's happened or why you're not responding to us. Your mother is beside herself with worry. We've called hospitals in Boston. We've called your workplace, and they won't tell us anything except that you don't work at the Boston office anymore. Please just let us know you're alive and okay. That's all we're asking right now." That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching ferries cross Puget Sound as the sun set behind the Olympic Mountains. The beauty before me contrasted sharply with the turmoil I felt hearing my father's distress. For a moment, I considered sending a brief message. "I'm alive. I'm fine. Please don't worry." But something held me back. 32 years of emotional neglect couldn't be erased by a few weeks of concern that might be more about their discomfort than genuine care for me. What would happen if I responded? A brief expression of relief, followed by a quick return to the status quo. No, I needed to see this through to discover whether their concern was fleeting or transformative. Instead of contacting my family, I channeled my conflicted emotions into writing. I began journaling extensively, documenting my experiences in Seattle, alongside reflections on my childhood and family dynamics. The process proved cathartic, allowing me to externalize thoughts I had suppressed for years. Through this writing, patterns emerged, instances of favoritism and dismissal, more numerous and damaging than I had allowed myself to acknowledge. I also found a therapist, Dr. Eleanor Warren, who specialized in family estrangement. Our weekly sessions provided a safe space to examine my decision and its emotional aftermath. She neither encouraged reconciliation nor validated permanent separation, instead helping me explore what healthy boundaries might look like, regardless of what path I ultimately chose. Disappearing was a way to reclaim power in a situation where you felt powerless, she observed during one session. The question now is how to use that power constructively for your healing, whether that eventually includes your family or not. As December arrived, bringing Seattle's characteristic rain and early darkness, I found myself settling into a rhythm that felt increasingly natural. My apartment had become a true home reflecting my tastes and interests without compromise. Work continued to challenge and fulfill me. The hiking group had evolved into genuine friendships with regular outings and dinner gatherings. I had even begun dating someone, an architect named Melissa, whom I met at a technology conference downtown. For the first time in my life, I existed in spaces where I was valued for myself, not measured against a sibling or found wanting by parental standards. I was discovering who Lester could be, when not constrained by the role of overlooked son. And I liked this emerging person, his confidence and capacity for joy. The holidays arrived, typically a time of stress and performance in my family. This year I accepted an invitation to join my new friends for an orphan Christmas gathering. The day passed in laughter, good food, and board games by a fireplace. No one dominated conversations, no one's achievements were minimized, no one sat in the corner wondering why their presence seemed superfluous. That night, checking my phone out of habit, I found 7 missed calls and numerous text messages. My parents and Jessica had apparently spent Christmas trying desperately to reach me. Jessica's last text captured their escalating concern. "This isn't funny anymore, Lester. Mom cried all through dinner. Dad keeps calling hospitals again. If you're doing this on purpose, it's cruel." Cruel. The word lingered in my mind as I prepared for bed. Was my disappearance cruel? Or was it the natural consequence of years of emotional neglect? Would they have noticed my absence so keenly if the holiday hadn't required my physical presence? Would they have cared about my birthday if Jessica hadn't needed a house that week? 6 months into my new life, I no longer checked for their messages daily. Weeks sometimes passed before I reviewed the accumulated voicemails and texts, each review showing their concern, maintaining its intensity rather than diminishing with time. My father had begun ending his messages with, "We love you, son" words. I couldn't recall him saying directly to me before. Part of me wondered if I had achieved my purpose. They noticed my absence. They expressed concern and love. Perhaps I could respond now, establish contact on new terms. But another part remained cautious, unwilling to risk returning to old patterns without evidence of genuine change. And so, my silence continued as Seattle's winter gave way to spring, and my roots in this new city grew deeper. By the 6-month mark of my new life in Seattle, I had established routines that felt natural and fulfilling. My work had earned recognition with a promotion to team lead on our most innovative telehealth project. Weekends were filled with hiking expeditions, exploring the diverse neighborhoods of Seattle, and deepening friendships. My relationship with Melissa had progressed to spending several nights a week at each other's apartments, discussing potential vacation plans for the summer. It was during this period of personal flourishing that my family's search efforts transformed from concerning to comically misguided. Their genuine worry had apparently morphed into increasingly desperate and ineffective attempts to locate me. Attempts that demonstrated how little they truly understood about my life. The first indication came through a former colleague who remained in the Boston office. He called one evening, confusion evident in his voice. "Lester, weird question. But did you know your family is looking for you? Your sister came by the office today asking if anyone had heard from you. She seemed pretty upset." This news surprised me. Jessica had actually made the effort to visit my former workplace in person. "What did people tell her?" I asked. "Not much. You know company policy about employee information. HR just confirmed you no longer work in Boston." She got pretty angry, said it was a family emergency. Security eventually had to escort her out. I thanked him for the information, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Jessica's visit represented effort I wouldn't have expected from her yet. Her entitled behavior and angry response seemed characteristic of her approach to life, expecting doors to open simply because she demanded it. A week later, Melissa showed me a Facebook post that had appeared in her feed through mutual connections. "Is this your sister?" she asked, turning her laptop toward me. There on the screen was Jessica's page featuring a photo of me from about 2 years earlier. The accompanying text read, "Please share. My brother Lester has been missing for over 6 months. Our family is desperately worried. If anyone has seen him or has any information, please contact me immediately." The post had been shared several hundred times, primarily by Jessica's friends and our extended family members. What struck me as absurd was that my own Facebook profile remained active though, with restricted privacy settings and minimal recent activity. I hadn't changed my name or removed my photo. Anyone doing minimal research could confirm I wasn't missing in the traditional sense. Even more ridiculous, several of my former Boston colleagues had commented on Jessica's post, saying they understood I had transferred to Seattle and seemed to be doing well based on professional networking sites. Jessica had aggressively responded to these comments, insisting they must be mistaken since our family had no knowledge of any move to Seattle. "Did you tell them you were moving?" Melissa asked gently. "No," I admitted, but I didn't hide it either. My company knows. My address change is on file with banks, credit cards, the postal service. I'm still using the same phone number and email addresses. I'm not exactly in witness protection. Melissa nodded thoughtfully. It's strange they wouldn't check those obvious things first. "Not really," I replied. "They've never paid much attention to the details of my life. Why start now?" The situation escalated further when my Aunt Susan, my mother's sister, who lived in Portland, called to express concern. "Your mother is falling apart, Lester. She's calling me daily in tears. They've put up missing person flyers in your old neighborhood. William has hired a private investigator. What's going on?" I hesitated before responding. Aunt Susan had always been kind to me, occasionally noticing the imbalance in my parents' treatment of their children. "I needed some space," I finally said. "I'm not missing. I'm establishing my own life." A long pause followed. "You didn't tell them you were leaving. Would they have noticed if I had?" Another pause. "That's between you and them, but they're genuinely distraught. I appreciate your concern, Aunt Susan. I'm doing well. I'm safe and healthy. That's all I can say right now. Will you at least let me tell them that much?" I considered this request. "You can tell them you've heard I'm safe. Don't tell them we spoke directly or where I am. I need this boundary right now." She agreed reluctantly, and we ended the call with her promise to respect my wishes while encouraging me to eventually make direct contact. True to Susan's word, my parents had indeed hired a private investigator, a fact I discovered when a professionally dressed woman approached me outside my Seattle office building one afternoon. "Mr. McKinnon," she inquired, extending a business card. "Rebecca Torres, private investigator. Your parents hired me to locate you." I accepted the card without commenting, noting the Boston address of her agency. "They're extremely concerned about your welfare," she continued. "Would you be willing to speak with them?" "How long did it take you to find me?" I asked, genuinely curious. She looked slightly uncomfortable. "Less than 2 days once I was hired. Your digital footprint isn't exactly hidden. Credit card activity, employment records, lease agreement on your apartment. Basic investigative work." The absurdity struck me fully then. My parents had spent months in apparently frantic searching, yet a professional had located me in under 48 hours, using information readily available to them had they bothered to look. They had created drama and concern among our extended family and social circles, rather than conducting even minimal practical investigation. "Please tell my parents that I'm alive and well," I said to Miss Torres. "Tell them I've chosen to establish some distance and will contact them when I'm ready. That's all I wish to communicate at this time." She nodded professionally. "I understand. I'll convey your message exactly as stated." As she walked away, I wondered if this would finally end their theatrical search efforts. It didn't. Within days, my mother began posting tearful videos on her rarely used Facebook page, pleading for me to come home. "Lester, we don't understand what's happened. Whatever it is, we can fix it. Please just call us. We love you so much." These performances for That's How They Struck Me accumulated dozens of sympathetic comments from friends and family, expressing shock at my cruelty and urging me to respond to my poor parents. Not one commenter questioned why I might have left or what family dynamics might have contributed to my decision. Jessica took a different approach, posting angry rants about my selfish disappearance and the stress it was causing our parents. While mom and dad worry themselves sick, my brother is apparently living his best life in Seattle without a care for the pain he's causing. Who does that? The irony of Jessica, who had absorbed our parents' attention and resources for decades accusing me of selfishness, was not lost on me. Her posts revealed that despite the private investigator confirming my well-being, my family continued to frame my absence as a mysterious crisis rather than a deliberate choice. Perhaps the most ridiculous moment came when my father apparently contacted my bank, attempting to use his status as an accountant and my parent to access information about my accounts. The bank's privacy protocols prevented any disclosure, but their compliance department contacted me about the attempt. "We wanted to confirm that you haven't authorized anyone to access your financial information," the representative explained. "Your privacy is protected regardless, but we like to notify customers of such attempts." I assured them I had not granted permission and requested additional security measures on my accounts. The incident highlighted how my father, despite his professional background in finance, believed family connection superseded legal privacy protections, another indication of boundary issues I had normalized for too long. By the 8-month mark, my parents' search efforts reached their most dramatic peak. Having apparently exhausted other options, they flew to Seattle, unannounced, showing up at my company's office building one Tuesday morning. Security called up to confirm I was willing to meet visitors claiming to be my parents. I declined the meeting, asking security to inform them I was aware of their presence but not available to speak with them. Through the office windows, I watched as they stood uncertainly on the sidewalk for nearly an hour before finally leaving my father's arm around my mother's shoulders. That evening, my phone rang with my father's number. Unlike previous calls, I answered this one. "We're at the Hotel Theodore downtown," he said, without preamble, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "We'd like to see you, Lester. Please." "No," I replied simply. "Son, we've flown across the country. We just want to talk." "I didn't ask you to come." A brief silence followed. "What have we done to deserve this treatment? We've been worried sick for months." The question, so lacking in self-awareness, nearly made me laugh. "I'll meet you tomorrow," I said finally. "Not at your hotel. There's a coffee shop called Victrola on 15th Avenue, 10 in the morning. Just the two of you, not Jessica." "Thank you," my father said, audible relief in his voice. "We'll be there." As I ended the call, I realized I had reached another turning point. The theatrical search efforts had culminated in an actual cross-country journey. Now I would discover whether my parents were truly interested in understanding my departure or merely in restoring their comfort by returning me to my assigned role in the family. That night, I barely slept, rehearsing what I might say, how I would maintain boundaries while explaining years of accumulated hurt. By morning, I had settled on a simple approach: complete honesty delivered, without emotional manipulation or blame, just the unvarnished truth about my experience as their son. As I walked toward Victrola the next morning, I spotted them already seated by a window. My mother anxiously scanning the sidewalk, my father checking his watch. For a moment, I considered turning around, returning to the safety of my self-created life. But the time had come to confront the past in order to fully claim my future, whatever form that might take. The Victrola Coffee Roasters on 15th Avenue exemplified Seattle's famous coffee culture with its exposed brick walls, carefully preserved vintage details, and the rich aroma of freshly roasted beans. I had chosen it deliberately for this confrontation, a neutral territory where I felt comfortable, but my parents would be visitors, reversing our usual dynamic. They spotted me before I reached their table. My mother half rose her face, displaying a mixture of relief and anxiety. My father remained seated, but straightened his expression, guarded yet hopeful. Both looked older than I remembered, the months of uncertainty etched into new lines around their eyes and mouths. "Lester," my mother breathed, as I approached, reaching out, as if to embrace me. I sat down across from them without accepting the offered hug. "Hello," I said simply. My mother slowly sank back into her chair, hands fluttering uncertainly before settling in her lap. "You look well," she offered tentatively. "I am well," I confirmed. "Seattle agrees with me." My father cleared his throat. "Son, we've been out of our minds with worry. What happened? Why did you just disappear without a word?" The directness of his question confirmed they still didn't understand. In their minds, my departure, was a mysterious event, disconnected from our family history. Perhaps a mental health crisis or impulsive decision requiring explanation. "When was my birthday last year?" I asked instead of answering directly. My parents exchanged confused glances. "October 14th, my mother said. "But what does that have to do with?" "What did you do on October 14th last year?" I continued maintaining eye contact. My father frowned slightly. "I don't remember specifically. It was months ago." "You attended the closing for Jessica's house," I said, keeping my voice even. "You bought my sister a $750,000 house, but couldn't send me a text message on my birthday." My mother's eyes widened. "Oh, Lester, the closing was scheduled months in advance. We didn't realize—" "That's exactly the point," I interrupted. "You didn't realize. You didn't think about me at all. Jessica called me that night not to wish me happy birthday, but to excitedly tell me about her new house. That was the moment I decided to leave." My father leaned forward. "You disappeared caused us months of worry and fear because we forgot your birthday. That seems extremely disproportionate, Lester." "It wasn't just the birthday," I explained, forcing myself to remain calm. "That was simply the final confirmation of what I've known my entire life. I don't matter to you the way Jessica does. I never have." "That's not true," my mother protested. "We love both our children equally." "Do you?" I asked quietly. "When was the last time you called, just to ask about my day? When did you last remember an important event in my life without being reminded? When have you ever given me a fraction of the emotional or financial support you've consistently given Jessica?" My father's face hardened. "We didn't need to support you because you've always been self-sufficient. You got scholarships, good jobs. Jessica has struggled more. And have you ever asked yourself why I became so self-sufficient? It was because I learned early that I couldn't count on your attention or support. I excelled because it was the only way I could think of to try to earn your notice. But even that didn't work. My achievements were expected, Jessica's mediocrity celebrated." My mother began to cry softly. "We had no idea you felt this way." "Because you never asked," I said simply. "You never noticed. For 32 years I existed on the periphery of this family, watching Jessica receive everything I desperately wanted. Not material things, but your time, your interest, your unconditional love." My father shook his head. "This is ridiculous. We've always been there for you." When I challenged, "Name one time you put me first. One time you prioritized my needs or wants over Jessica's." He opened his mouth, then closed it again, clearly struggling to produce an example. "The fact that you can't immediately think of an instance proves my point," I said. "And that's why I left. I finally accepted that nothing I did would ever change the dynamic in our family. So I decided to build a life where I'm valued for who I am, not constantly measuring myself against a sister who can do no wrong in your eyes." My mother reached across the table, trying to take my hand. I allowed the contact briefly before withdrawing. "Lester, if we've made you feel this way, we're truly sorry. We can change. We can do better." Perhaps I acknowledged. But I needed this time away to understand that I'm not the problem. I spent my life thinking if I just achieved more, helped more, complained less, maybe then I'd earn equal standing in this family. Now I realize that's not how love should work. It shouldn't be earned. It should be freely given. My father, looking genuinely distressed for perhaps the first time in our relationship, spoke more softly. "What do you want from us now, Lester? Why agree to this meeting?" It was a fair question. "I wanted you to know that I'm not missing. I chose to leave. I'm building a good life here. And I wanted you to understand why. Because despite everything, you are still my parents, and I thought you deserved an explanation." "And now?" my mother asked, voice trembling. "Will you come home?" "This is my home now," I said firmly. "I'm not returning to Boston." "But will you at least stay in contact?" she pressed. "Call occasionally, visit for holidays." I considered my response carefully. I'm open to rebuilding our relationship, but only if it's fundamentally different from before. I won't return to being an afterthought, the reliable son who sits quietly while Jessica dominates every interaction. If you want me in your lives, you'll need to demonstrate that you truly see me, value me, and respect my boundaries. My father nodded slowly. What does that look like practically? For now, it means giving me space. No more dramatic search efforts, no flying across country unannounced, no manipulative social media posts. I'll contact you when I'm ready for the next step. And Jessica, my mother asked hesitantly. She's very upset by all this. Jessica has enjoyed being the center of attention her entire life, I replied. My absence threatens that position, because suddenly you're focusing on me, even if it's through worry. My relationship with her will need to change too, but that's between Jessica and me when I'm ready to address it. For the next hour, our conversation continued in this vein. My parents alternated between defensive justifications and seemingly genuine remorse. I maintained my position calmly, neither accusing nor absolving, simply stating my experience and my requirements for potential reconciliation. As we prepared to leave, my father asked one final question. Was there really no better way to handle this than disappearing? Do you know what it's like to fear your child might be dead? I met his gaze directly. Do you know what it's like to be emotionally invisible to your parents for 32 years? We've all experienced pain in this situation. The difference is that mine has been happening since childhood, while yours is recent and self-inflicted. My mother flinched at these words, but my father nodded slowly, a hint of dawning comprehension in his eyes. I hope we can find a way forward, he said quietly. So do I replied, and found that I meant it. Despite everything some part of me still hoped for, healing still wanted parents who could truly see and value me. As we said goodbye outside the coffee shop, there were no hugs or promises of immediate resolution. Instead, there was something potentially more valuable. The first honest conversation we had ever had about our family dynamic. The beginning of seeing each other as we truly were, rather than through the distorting lens of established roles. I watched them walk away toward their hotel, my mother leaning slightly against my father, his arm around her waist. They looked smaller somehow, more human, and less like the towering figures of my childhood who had held such power over my sense of worth. As I turned toward my apartment, I felt lighter, unburdened by secrets and unspoken truths. Whether this meeting marked the beginning of a new relationship with my parents, or simply provided closure to an unhealthy one, remained to be seen. Either way, I had spoken my truth and stood my ground. For now, that was enough. 6 months after our confrontation at Victrola Coffee, Seattle's brief but glorious summer was in full bloom. Mount Rainier stood sentinel on clear days, Pike Place Market overflowed with vibrant flowers and fresh produce, and parks filled with people soaking up sunshine before the return of the city's characteristic rain. My life had settled into a rhythm that felt both comfortable and energizing. My promotion to senior project manager had brought new challenges and opportunities at work. Melissa and I had moved in together, combining our lives in a larger apartment with a spectacular view of Lake Union. Weekend hiking expeditions with friends had become sacred ritual, each trail offering new perspectives on the breathtaking Pacific Northwest landscape. True to my request, my parents had given me space following our meeting. No more frantic calls, no surprise visits, no public pleas on social media. Instead, my father sent a single email a week after returning to Boston. Lester, we've been doing a lot of thinking about what you said. You're right that we've failed to see you clearly or value you equally. We're not asking for immediate forgiveness, but we want you to know we're committed to understanding how we've hurt you and doing better if you ever decide to give us another chance. We're here when and if you're ready. Love, Dad. The simplicity and humility of this message surprised me. For the first time in my memory, my father had acknowledged wrongdoing without qualification or excuse. I didn't respond immediately, allowing myself time to process this apparent shift. 2 months after our meeting, I received an unexpected package. Inside was a book titled, When Parents Play Favorites, Healing Adult Sibling Relationships, with a note from my mother explaining that she and my father were reading it together, working with a family therapist to understand the dynamics I had described. We should have seen this years ago, she wrote. We're so sorry we didn't. This concrete evidence of effort, rather than mere words of regret, moved me. I sent a brief text thanking them for the update and expressing appreciation for their willingness to examine their behavior. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was acknowledgement of their steps toward change. Jessica took longer to make contact. When she finally did her message, reflected her continuing struggle to understand her role in our family dynamic. "I never asked them to favor me," she wrote. "It's not my fault. They treated us differently." "You're right," I replied, after careful consideration. "The responsibility lies primarily with our parents. But as adults, we have choices about perpetuating unhealthy patterns. You accepted advantages knowing I was overlooked. That's something we'll need to discuss if we're going to have a relationship moving forward." Her response came days later, shorter but more thoughtful. "I never saw it from your perspective before. I'm trying to understand." These tentative communications continued sporadically over the following months. Sometimes weeks passed without contact, allowing all of us space to reflect and grow separately before engaging again. I maintained firm boundaries around these interactions, ending conversations that veered into old patterns of dismissal or defensiveness. My therapist, Dr. Warren, provided valuable guidance during this period. "Reconciliation doesn't mean returning to the way things were," she reminded me. "It means creating something new that honors everyone's growth and needs." October 14th marked my 33rd birthday and the one-year anniversary of my decision to disappear. That morning I woke to find Melissa had decorated our apartment with balloons and prepared my favorite breakfast. My team at work surprised me with cake and thoughtful gifts selected with genuine knowledge of my interests. At precisely 10 o'clock, my phone chimed with 3 separate text messages arriving simultaneously, clearly coordinated. From my father, "Happy birthday, son. Proud of the man you are." From my mother, "Celebrating you today and always. Happy birthday, Lester." From Jessica, "HBD brother. Hope it's a good one." Simple messages, but significant in their timeliness and intent. For the first time in my adult life, my entire family had remembered my birthday without prompting. A small step, perhaps, but meaningful in context. That evening, I received an email from my father containing details of a bank account he had established in my name. "Jessica received significant financial support from us throughout her 20s. And for her house," he wrote, "this represents an equivalent investment in you. Use it as you see fit, whether for your future home, travel, further education, or investment. No strings attached." The account contained a sum that genuinely surprised me, substantial enough to serve as a down payment on a home in Seattle's expensive market. My initial reaction was ambivalence, uncertain if accepting this money would somehow invalidate my stance. After discussing it with Melissa and Dr. Warren, I realized the gift represented my father's concrete acknowledgement of the imbalance. I had described a tangible effort to rectify years of inequality in the only way he truly understood. I thanked him by phone, our first real conversation since Seattle. "This doesn't erase the past," I said honestly, "but I appreciate the gesture and what it represents." "I know," he replied, his voice steady, but with an unfamiliar undertone of vulnerability. "It's just a start." As winter approached, bringing Seattle's characteristic gray skies and persistent drizzle, my parents suggested visiting for Thanksgiving. I proposed an alternative, inviting them to come in early December, instead separating their visit from the holiday pressure and associations. "We'd like to see your life there," my mother said. "Meet Melissa, see where you work, let you show us your Seattle." Their willingness to come to me, rather than expecting me to return to Boston, represented another small but significant shift in our dynamic. I agreed to the visit with clear parameters about its length and expectations. When they arrived, I observed them with new eyes. My father less commanding than in my childhood, memories genuinely attempted to connect through questions about my work and listening attentively to my responses. My mother, seeing my apartment for the first time, refrained from suggestions about decoration or improvement, instead commenting on how perfectly the space reflected my personality. They made similar efforts, with Melissa asking about her architecture work with genuine interest, never once making pointed inquiries about the seriousness of our relationship or future plans, as they might have before. When I took them to my favorite spots around Seattle, they engaged with the experience rather than comparing everything unfavorably to Boston, as I had feared. The visit wasn't perfect. Old habits occasionally surfaced, like my father automatically taking charge when selecting restaurants, or my mother momentarily slipping into treating me as an accessory rather than the primary focus of their trip. But these instances were fewer than I expected, and most importantly, they seemed aware when these patterns emerged, often correcting themselves without prompting. On their final evening over dinner, at a restaurant overlooking Puget Sound, my father raised his glass in a toast. To new beginnings, he said, simply, eyes meeting mine, with what appeared to be genuine regret for the past and hope for the future. I returned to Boston for the first time that spring, a brief weekend visit on my terms. The experience proved surreal, revisiting familiar places as a fundamentally different person than the one who had left. My parents' house, once a site of such discomfort, felt less oppressive when I entered as a visitor rather than the overlooked son. Jessica and I had our first extended conversation alone during that trip, sitting in a cafe where we had often gone as teenagers. I never realized how much attention I took up, she admitted. Mom and Dad have been different since you left, more reflective. Dad actually asked me last month if I thought he had been a good father to you. I didn't know how to answer. And what do you think now? I asked. She considered carefully before responding. I think they failed you in important ways, and I was too self-absorbed to notice or care. I'm sorry for that, Lester. Her apology, unexpected and seemingly genuine, marked another step in the gradual reconstruction of our family relationships. Not erasure of the past, but acknowledgement and commitment to different patterns moving forward. Back in Seattle, continuing to build my life with Melissa and our circle of friends, I reflected often on the strange journey of the past 18 months. The desperate act of disappearing had ultimately made me more visible, not just to my family but to myself. By removing myself from an environment where I had been chronically unseen, I created space to discover who I truly was and what I genuinely deserved. The process of healing continued, neither linear nor guaranteed. Some days brought frustration when old wounds reopened during interactions with my family. Other days offered glimpses of what healthier relationships might eventually look like. Throughout, I maintained the boundaries that had been so crucial to my growth, unwilling to sacrifice my hard-won self-worth for the comfort of falling back into familiar patterns. Perhaps the most profound lesson emerged gradually over those months of separation and tentative reconnection. True family consists of those who see you clearly and value you consistently. Sometimes those people share your blood. Sometimes they enter your life through other paths. Building my chosen family in Seattle had shown me what genuine connection felt like, providing a standard against which to measure the evolving relationship with my parents and sister. I no longer needed their approval to feel complete. That realization, more than any specific action on their part, represented true freedom from the patterns that had constrained me for 3 decades. Whether our reconciliation continued to progress or eventually faltered, I had found my own worth independent of their recognition. As Melissa and I discussed marriage and our future together, I carried this knowledge forward, determined that any family we might create would follow different patterns. Every child would be seen and valued for exactly who they were. No one would grow up feeling invisible or measuring themselves against impossible standards of comparison. Sometimes the most profound act of healing is to break cycles rather than perpetuate them. Sometimes disappearing from one life is necessary to appear fully in another. And sometimes, if you're fortunate, those you leave behind might just find their way back to you, ready at last to see you as you truly are. Have you ever had to create distance from family or friends to protect your mental health? What boundaries have you established in your relationships that helped you grow stronger? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life journeys of healing and growth. Remember that sometimes the most difficult decisions lead to the most necessary transformations. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to be truly seen in your own life.